Hello everybody, welcome back to Screen Stars. I'm here today to bring you my review for the 2020 science fiction thriller Black Box, a film that is co-written and directed by Angel Delgado, and it stars Gary Graham Smith. Now this is a low-budget UK-based science fiction film, and it focuses on an astronaut. Well, strictly speaking, he's not an astronaut, but we'll call him an astronaut. Marcus. Now there has been an accident in space, and we first meet Marcus. He's like flying out of control in a pod. He wakes up, he's no memory of who he is, how he got there, sort of thing, and he's seeking help from ground control. And essentially it then becomes a rescue mission of how to get him back to Earth in one piece. But he also has the black box, because he's come from like orbiting station or something like that, and there was a disaster on there. He got off barely. He's injured, but he's also managed. He managed to think enough to get the black box off the space station before disaster struck. So he's got the black box, so it's imperative to get this guy back to Earth. So from that point on, it then becomes, a fight for survival. How are they going to figure out how to get him back home? Right. What are my thoughts on Black Box? Well, I reviewed something very similar to this a couple of years ago. A film called Solace, I think it was called. The guy... I can't remember the actor's name now, from Solace, but he played the guy in Grand Theft Auto, and very, very similar concept, if you like, that film. It was an astronaut stranded alone, if you like, and no way of getting back home. So it's a concept we've seen before in sci-fi quite a lot, like lifeboat, things like that, where people are floating around in space, little hope of survival, etc., etc. Does this one stand out from the crowd? Unfortunately not, no. This is a sci-fi film, if you like, to some degree, maybe for sci-fi purists in a lot of ways. It's just basically got one guy on screen, and it is this guy, this astronaut Marcus. He does a good enough job with what he's got to do in regards to his performance and things like that, but it's just him. The only other interaction that we get in this film is him talking to voices on the comm from ground control and things like that. And there's a couple of voices. There's one called Sarah who's quite supportive. There's another guy, I think he's called Ray, who's not very supportive. He's like the worst person you want to hear at the other end of the line. He's really impatient, not very supportive at all. So it's almost like good cop, bad cop on the comm. And then the only other voice we hear, I believe, is a doctor. Oh no, there's a doctor, and also they managed to get his father on the line for him to have a chat with. So that's it. That's the only interactions he has. The rest of the time, it's just him and them figuring out what they're going to do, and it kind of develops into a rescue mission as well, because there's another pod floating out there as well with one of his colleagues on it that they kind of decide they want to see if they can help. Or he certainly decides he wants to see if he can help. But he's got this kind of burning desire to be a hero, if you like, and that feeds heavily into the story as the film progresses. But unfortunately, you're going to struggle, I think, to maintain your interest. I certainly did for the majority of this film. It drags a little bit. It doesn't really get, overly tense in regards to things that are happening. Yes, the story's quite interesting, and the developments at the end, while not particularly shocking in some ways, it was an interesting way to sign off on the film. But there are a lot of issues with this film as well. I mean... Space Control, who were calling him, it's from Swindon. It's Swindon Space Control, and I was just like face palming at that point. I mean, we don't see it. You could have called it anything. Call it London Space Control, or I don't know, Glasgow, anything. But Swindon, it just really didn't work. I actually thought the effects were pretty good here as well, much better than I expected. You don't get an awful lot of effect shots, but you get some external effect shots. You get a lot of internal stuff, and it all looked, genuine enough. It looked like it would do what you wanted it to do for a sci-fi space film. And there's a bit of that you really have to suspend your disbelief. He does like this maneuver in space with masking tape around his face that, I'm sorry, it was ridiculous, and I really couldn't buy it, and at that point I was starting to really check out. But I've seen far worse sci-fi films than this. I thought there were aspects of it that worked. The performances were all fine, the effects were good, the immersion was all good. It kind of did what it was supposed to do. It was just a little bit dull from my perspective in regards to a science fiction film. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. It's not a bad film, but it is certainly not going to get the blood boiling for you sci-fi fans out there. So that is my review for Black Box. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Of course, I will be back with more content on the channel very, very soon.